welcome back to my channel. This is Michelle for AfroExpats, and today I have the absolute pleasure of speaking in person to Louis. So Louis is someone that I met online. I know I say that at the beginning of every single video, but he was actually looking for Black expats in Mexico for his doctorate program, correct?
Yes.
And he wanted to interview various people to ask them about their journey. I'll let him kind of get into the details. So in saying all of that, it was a few months ago I had an interview with him. It was such a pleasure. I think he's a very interesting young man, and I love what he's doing. So he's moving around Mexico, interviewing people in person or via Zoom. We did ours via Zoom when I was not here in Mazatlan, and that's where we are right now. So I was able to meet him over the last couple of days in person. We've had a nice time hanging out with you and Seth and Madison. We'll also do an interview with them a little bit later on today. So I asked him if he wanted to jump on a call or do an interview with me, because I think it's very applicable to what he's doing and also to what my channel is about, and also this lifestyle series, which we feature different people in parts of Mexico, and he's actually moving around Mexico just to kind of get a better feel for what that feels like as a Black expat. So I'm gonna let him jump right in.
Well,
Go
thank
right
you so
ahead.
much for having me,
Thank
Michelle.
you.
It's been a great pleasure to hang out with you and your family and enjoy Mazatlan too. I think one of the beautiful things about Mexico that I've really been able to witness is the importance of community and quality time, right? Like really getting to spend time with people and get to know them and appreciate the environment, the space, the water, the land, and certainly the food. And so I think it's been a great time with you, and I'm excited to be featured on this series.
Well, thank you. Thank you for coming and joining us. So first tell us where you're from and, you know, like your estimated time of how much, you know, like you're going to spend, how much time you're going to spend in Mexico, like what's your plan and how you're moving around.
Thanks for that. Well, I'm from North Carolina, a small place called Thomasville, furniture capital of the world, right between Greensboro and Winston-Salem. I don't think I necessarily imagined myself traveling the world as I am now, but I think through a variety of experiences through college and after, I've really taken a liking to the challenge of, you know, understanding both myself and the rest of the world, right? Like every place is different. Every place has different values, a different culture, a different rhythm of life, and to really see how, you know, every place in the world offers something different and something that I could like and some things I don't like, right? And so I'm super thankful for some of my first international experiences to South Africa and Zimbabwe, and then from there I haven't stopped traveling. And so I plan on being in Mexico probably for at least the next 9 months or so. Just traveling through major areas where there are a lot of Afro-expats and Black people who have moved from the United States at a variety of stages, whether it was a year ago or 3 decades ago. So it's been really a great pleasure to not only experience parts of Mexico myself and see why exactly people have chosen to make this place or a variety of places in Mexico home for them, but also to really hear the variety of stories of how people ended up here. Many people visited years ago and just kind of ended up falling in love with the place. San Miguel is one of those places too. And said, you know, let's make this place home, right? And I think that's a testament to homemaking and the work that people do to make a place home, and go beyond the bounds of what you may think you may be limited to, but to really envision a place where you can choose and have the best quality of life, I think is a really bold, brilliant, and beautiful thing that many of these Afro-expats have chosen to do.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, what do you feel is your general takeaway in regard to the homemaking situation or process? Because I think, we've often been in kind of a societal box, and I'm not just talking from like a Black perspective, but more from the perspective of, like you make a life in the US and, this is how you do it, and, these are the things you strive for, and here's what that should look like. But having kind of gone through this process from your perspective, what do you think kind of dictates that, home kind of setup or feel?
I love that question because I'm not an expat, right? I'm just beginning my research, and I'll talk about that in a few moments. But I think what is really unique about my experience and where we kind of cross over is I'm doing a lot of the exploratory work, right? I know in a lot of the Facebook groups, people jump in and say, hey, I want to move, I want to explore a new place, where should I go, right? And you'll hear everything from Kuwait to Kyrgyzstan to Kenya to Mexico. Like you'll hear, and people will throw out a variety of places, right? But I think what's really interesting is you have to really go to a place sometimes, and you have to bounce around and see, like, do I really feel the ebb and flow of this community? Do I feel welcomed here? Do I feel like I could have a sustainable life? Do I have a place that has all the things that I need? And the thing is, for different people, you're gonna have different needs, right? And so part of my journey is thinking about all the different places, key places in Mexico that people go, and see, what is unique that's being offered in Oaxaca, or what's being offered in Zihuatanejo, or what's being offered in Guadalajara, what's being offered in Monterrey. Like all the different places that people may choose may have different offerings, and I think that's a unique perspective, or at least a challenge to figure out exactly what you want, right? And I don't think, to your point earlier, in a lot of the U.S. culture, do people have choices all the time, or you're even encouraged to think about choices and think about what you want to do. Oftentimes you're confronted with structural constraints, you're confronted with financial limitations, you're confronted with family obligations. There's so many things that may constrain your choices, that also may constrain some of your choices in Mexico, but really think about what is putting your needs first too. And I think that's a beautiful thing that that I've seen a lot of expats do.
Yeah, I agree with that. I think that, on the journey of planning, what would feel like home, I always say to all my clients, like, please do your research as much as you can, even if you're not physically able to go to a place. Call someone, connect with the expat groups in that area, and I don't say just the Black expat groups. I think it's good to see it from a lot of different angles, because some of the non-Black expat pages have a lot of information, and that's kind of what I did before doing the research trip, was really digging, really kind of internalizing my feelings about what I was seeing, and then really thinking about my family dynamics and so on and so forth. Obviously, you could get to somewhere and you thought it was what it was supposed to be, and it wasn't, and there are a lot of other options and choices, and you know this because you've been kind of moving around. So where have you gotten to visit so far?
So I'm still very early in my journey, but I feel like I've learned and seen so much already. I spent 2 months in Oaxaca, specifically Centro, and then I was able to go to some of the smaller places on the coast, like Puerto Escondido and Altuco. And then this is I'm spending all of August in Mazatlan, and then afterwards I'll go to Guadalajara, and then from there I'll figure it out, But I think it's really interesting because every place in Mexico is so unique and so diverse. And one of the things I said to you, I think a couple of days ago, is I don't think the map of Mexico does it justice, right? When we look at the globe, I don't think it does it justice in terms of just how geographically diverse it is. Like there are places where you can get some of the most beautiful mountains and have amazing views, out looking out. You can be on the coast of the water. You can be in one of the biggest cities in the world, like Mexico City. You know, there's so many things that Mexico offers, and so to really appreciate that, and also think about all the things that a variety of expats have put forward in terms of where they want to live, where they want to situate, choosing what works best for them and their families is really unique. And I think what's really beautiful in a lot of this work is I think a lot of people have been able to do a lot of the healing work and finding a place that works with their soul and with their energy, and they don't necessarily feel overwhelmed, and there can be a sense of calmness. One of the things that I really appreciate about Oaxaca is to really see art everywhere. Every corner, every block, there's murals, there's people who have the real profession of being creatives and putting creative work out there. And I think for me as a visual artist, I had not stepped into my artistry as much, and I think I had put a lot of it on the back burner and kind of seen it as a side hobby. But to really be in Oaxaca and appreciate that creative energy is one of the reasons why it could be on the place for me to live. And that's something I don't think I've seen a lot of people talk about online, but certainly a benefit of going there in person and really feeling and appreciating that energy. But I think every place, it's going to be the water here in Mazatlan. We were talking yesterday is super clear and also really warm. So every place I think is really special in a different way. And I think it is the challenge of figuring out exactly what works for you. And I think we don't always get to put, ourselves first or think about our needs. But I think when you move to another country, you have to put that at the forefront.
Absolutely. I think that you think about it more. I think in the U.S., a lot of times the needs that are in front of us are also necessities, but it could be cost, job, where do I put my children into school, etc. And here, some of those things are factors, but I think you have a lot more options that you can fit your budget into. Like if you wanted to live in Mexico City, you could do that. I know that I've always loved the idea of living, at least in the past, in New York, and I just, I always had the roadblock of the financial part of it. Yes, I could probably get a job paying me a lot, but how much of that's going to come out of my pocket to keep a roof over my head? And I think here we don't have the same viewpoints in regard to, and I say we, meaning, if you are an expat, you're coming with US dollars and, you want to have your kind of like pick of where you want to be. There are definitely a lot more options for how that looks for you on your, internal vision. It's like, okay, I want to live by the ocean. I want to have a nice place or comfortable place. I don't want to be too far. I want this. You can fulfill and check off a lot more of those, things. So, and I say that all the time. I am also kind of experiencing this new place with you because you just got here not too long ago as well. And I like it. I mean, I really didn't expect to like it as much. I really was just thinking about the heat.
Yeah, it is.
And the funny thing is I actually like the heat, but I don't know. I think living in San Miguel and in the mountains, it has kind of put me in this frame of mind that over there it's really comfortable, and even when it gets a little cold, I can put another layer on and I'm okay. But then coming here, it's like, oh my God, it's so hot. And it's actually not that bad, because I've been in the Yucatan. I've been a little farther south along the same coastline in Zihuatanejo in May, and it just felt really like super steamy. And this isn't too bad, but I think a part of that is because I haven't spent a lot of time in the sun the middle of the day. But what I really like about Mazatlan, and I said this in my live so far, is that I feel like the city has more of a plan as far as like the building along the ocean. It's not really hodgepodge and slapped together like some other places in Mexico, and it just feels like it's thought out. Definitely doesn't remind me hardcore of a Mexican town, like an inner city. It doesn't have like the same kind of authenticity that like a Puebla would have, or even like Oaxaca.
Yeah.
You know, it's very modern. So it's a good option though. I think that if you are looking to be beachside anywhere in Mexico, definitely check this place out. I think it's so worth it. And you know, it doesn't also, I don't know, do you think it feels overpopulated or not really?
I think it's difficult because difficult to answer, because where I'm located, I'm in a major touristy area, so I see people like all the time. Okay. But it's my understanding that the kind of further you get away from the main strip, you know, it's much calmer, and it's not as many people. We're still coming out of I think high travel season, and to my understanding, not everyone's going back to school. I think some things are still online, so people are still out and enjoying the sun, and it's definitely out here, and so are the people.
Oh yeah, for sure, definitely at night.
Definitely at night.
Like wow, okay. So as far as your research, like what would you say has been maybe one of the more surprising things in speaking to Black expats, you know, just kind of, you know, maybe a repeated eye-opening moment where you're like, oh, this is starting to sound kind of like a little bit of a pattern with what I'm getting for information, because you are doing research in the end. Do you have any like thing in particular that kind of keeps coming up?
Yeah, I would say there's a few things that continue to come up. I think for a lot of people, what's interesting is the move to Mexico really changes their life, right? We think about, at least I think oftentimes about the social conditions in our social environment, how much that shapes our health, our mental health in particular, our physical health, and really our whole lifestyle. So it's really been a continuous pattern to see people's lives really improve to some extent when they move to Mexico, right? The ability to eat fresh food, really, that's grown all of maybe 5, maybe 10 miles away, right? To be able to afford a high quality of life, I think has had some major changes on people's health, right? Another aspect of that is also connected to the financial, is a lot of people are able to save and have some disposable income that when they're living in the United States, they wouldn't have to travel or get gifts or do things that they would be able to, they would like to do. So like moving to Mexico offers really to some extent a financial relief and a restrictive budget, right? And that's been a major thing in that people are still able to live a high quality life and not sacrifice the things that they need in their health and things that they want to do because they don't have the money for it, right? Another aspect I think that has been really a pattern is that people really do feel often really welcome in Mexico. I think not necessarily every place, but people do talk about the appreciation for Black culture and to some extent different diasporas, and that many places and community interactions in Mexico are not too different from those in the Caribbean and in the continent of Africa, right? When we think about diasporas, there's a lot of similarities that it's quite easy to feel like you might be at home and have a familial feeling with other people and relations with other people has been a interesting pattern. The other pattern I think that has been really interesting that I really want to write about is kind of like the notions of safety. Is that I think a lot of people in the United States and a lot of people in Mexico have been, and I think you said this the other day, have been dealt a false perception about the other, right? And I think there's this still strong perception that Mexico isn't safe. And I always say that everywhere in the world there's dangerous places, right? And there are definitely some dangerous places in Mexico, period, right? But what has been really interesting is to hear all the experiences of a lot of afroexpats that live here and they feel safe, you know? And then a lot of their conversations with others, you know, they're like, yeah, I feel safe here in Mexico. And people are really surprised that they're able to live a comfortable and safe life here, and people ask them all the time, and people have asked me this too, be careful, I don't want anything bad to happen to you, and that comes from a good place,
right?
But we definitely have not, I've definitely heard that as a continuous pattern, that other people are concerned about their safety, but
right.
when they get here, it's a completely different feeling.
They're somewhat surprised.
They're somewhat surprised. Yeah.
And I was in that same position. Not that I was so worried about. Well, I guess it falls in line with being safe. I think I had the mom thing because it was just myself and my son. And when I moved into our townhouse, we live on the second and the third floor, and I may have said this in another video, but I want to give like the initial things that I really felt, and that was that. And a part of it was because there was the US side of feeling like if something happens, there will be a million I told you so's.
Yeah.
And like, why did you do that and whatever. So I think that kind of put that kind of barrier around me where I was like extra cautious, where I was like making sure where am I going, until I got a lay of the land, until I really was able to, okay, this is what makes me feel okay. I'm also online trying to stay up on any issues or challenges they may be having in the city that I live in. Additionally, there's that isolation where when you first get to Mexico, for example, in the US, you can turn the news on and you watch it freely. If you understand the language here, then obviously you could do that. But I didn't understand it enough. I was like, I don't even know what channel to turn to. Does this apply to San Miguel, or is this the whole country? So there are like all these little like nuances of things that you don't realize until you arrive. So in saying all of that in terms of safety, when we got into our complex, I knew it was safe, but I really wanted to make sure we were like extra like protected and whatever. So here I am sweating at night, doors completely shut on the third floor, not getting any air, because I'm like, maybe someone's gonna, whatever. And then I had to think about like, where did all of this come from? And it's a real thing. I mean, I was also on edge at times in the US because I lived on a 2-level townhouse there as well. And I thought, all right, there's all big windows downstairs, it's not the best neighborhood, it's not the worst, but you know what I'm saying? Like, it could happen there. So I think that people have like a different perception about what safety is or what's not safe here, because we've been told about drugs and cartel and all these other things, and I think that a lot of it has to do with that. I remember even asking a friend, and they like, hey, should I be concerned about kidnapping, because we hear about this and we think, what is that all about? Like, what was that reality show about people being kidnapped? It was like years ago. Anyway, you're like a baby. You probably don't remember. But anyway, I remember seeing those like TV shows and thinking, and then, my friend's like, you're not their demographic. Like, what would they kidnap you for? Like, what are you going to give them? And I remember thinking like, yeah, you're right. Like, what exactly would I have to offer? Because I don't, But my point simply is what you were saying is everywhere has its challenges in terms of crime. It is wise for you to ask questions. Even if you're just traveling to visit a place and do your research, ask, where are the places around here or neighborhoods around here that I should just stay away from? Because you don't know the language, so it's like you do want to have an understanding of where you're moving into. Like some people may say, I really want to pay less rent, and sometimes that less rent comes with a less desirable neighborhood. Doesn't mean it's bad, it just means if you're the only person in that area, more than likely they're gonna be welcoming to you, more than likely, but you still want to make sure you feel comfortable before you sign a lease. And that's kind of like the judgment that I would make about safety, is use your common sense really anywhere you go in the world. That's important, so I'm right there with you. So anyway, tell us a little bit more, like how many, or I don't know if you remember, expats have you like really had a chance to kind of talk to, have you met, I'm assuming you've gone through like the gamut of how long people have been here, middle of the road, and like new recently.
No, it's
moved.
been really interesting. I think the oldest person I talked to, she's 75, and she's lived in Oaxaca since 1988. But there's also many people who have been here. Really, I'm still trying to make sense of what happened in the 90s or what the flow was in the late 90s. But a lot of people have been here since the late 90s, 98, 97. And then, of course, we have a lot of new people who have been here for going on a year, maybe 2 years, right? And so it's really interesting to hear all the different stories about, first, why people have come to Mexico and the different reasons for that, and then of course the different reasons for staying. And we know that in the larger expat conversation around the world, people go many places, but they don't always stay. I would say that there are a lot of reasons why people do choose Mexico and end up staying, right? They end up really falling in love with this place and everything that it has to offer. And then I've total interviews today, I've done 40. So yeah, I've been at work. I've been a busy person really throughout Mexico, right? And so I'm shooting for about 120.
Wow.
Okay. Yeah, since Mexico is so big, and I do want to, I don't want to bore you all with the statistical like sample representative, sampling frame, like all that stuff. But I do want to get a variety of opinions and experiences and different ages and certainly different locations. So no, it's been really beautiful to really collect all of these amazing Black stories and see Black life beyond particular boundaries. And to see how people have really made sense of their lives. And a lot of people, one of my favorite questions to ask is, did you imagine yourself living in Mexico? And for a lot of people, they're like, no, I did not know this was going to be a thing. Some people, especially if they came here earlier in their life or something, and kind of fell in love with the place early on and said, hey, I might come back to Mexico. But for a lot of people, it was just complete, like, I had no expectations. Mexico was not on my map.
Right.
And oftentimes people were on their way to other places, and that didn't work out and ended up back in Mexico and like, hey, I've been here for 5, 10, 15 years.
Wow.
Yeah.
No, I mean, that's pretty amazing. And to kind of backtrack to what you just said in regard to people were not necessarily planning Mexico, that has been the case for several of the interviews that I've done with people just in the last year, because they couldn't get to another country they planned on being in, and they didn't want to stay in the U.S. They had already planned on leaving, so they're like, okay, Mexico is still open, meaning I can still fly in. So they ended up moving here and falling in love. Wow, and it's kind of interesting because it almost is, if you ask for something, you may not always get what you planned, but you get what you need, and I've spoken to several people. For one lady in particular, she's in Puerto Vallarta, and she was supposed to take a trip to Puerto Vallarta, I think earlier this year, for a retreat. And, she's very much into like, the healing and emotions and, good energy and spiritual work. And the retreat was canceled, but she decided she was going to come anyway because she had her plane ticket. She got her, refund for the retreat portion. And, just talking to her, it was very interesting how I could feel what she felt. She just said, as soon as I arrived, I knew this was home for me. And she said, I had no intention of moving to Mexico. And like, now she's here. Like she's, she's just like, I went back home. I spoke to my job, and she's worked for, I don't know, she's worked wherever her company or business is, I think. Anyway, she's been there for over 20 years, and, it was just kind of like this light bulb, I guess, came on inside of her. It was like, okay, I have to get back to this place. This is where I'm supposed to be. And she's completely venturing off into something completely unrelated to what she did for all these years. And, just like you said, that transformation that you see when you speak to people, how they kind of ended up where they ended up. Even when we were talking about Hubert,
Yeah.
my man Hubert, you know,
So Hubert, yeah.
Yeah, I mean, you spoke to him, I spoke to him, and it's just, if I were to just talk or meet him in Texas, I would have just said, oh, he's not someone that would necessarily go to Mexico on a whim, right?
Yeah.
And I don't remember exactly his full story.
Yeah.
But I know he came here for like maybe some acupuncture or something like that. And then suddenly, here he is. Yeah, he's here, you know, and he's getting some land and he wants to farm. And yeah, it's just interesting how people are finding themselves in these journeys of, and they are part of our life. It is a life journey, you know.
And I think Mexico does that, and hopefully a lot of my work in the future career is to look at the entire world. But right now I'm particularly concentrated on Mexico. And I think one of the aspects about Mexican culture that shapes a lot of our the experience of people who end up moving here is the relationship to the environment and the land, right?
Yes.
And the attempt, at least culturally and physically, to remove the barriers to accessing land and experiencing the ecosystem, to go bird watching, right? Mm-hmm. To be in the ocean, to go hiking in the mountains and really enjoy that physical activity, right? I love talking to some of the expats in Lake Champala who are in their 70s and are hiking, right? Yeah. Like up those mountains, no problem. Yes. Had a hip replacement, still going, right?
Exactly.
To really have that connection with the land and the environment, I think is something that is really a unique offering of Mexico, right? Mm-hmm. And one thing I have really observed as well within the Mexican culture is a lot of people work so they can live, versus a lot of other cultures we know where there's a live so you can work, right? Exactly. And of course that's shaped by the larger systems of capitalism and just the constraints on social life. But here it's like people work, but like they really enjoy their lives to the full extent, right? Yeah. And really appreciate engaging in spiritual work, engaging in the environment, engaging in community work. And I think that's one of the drivers for a lot of people, is to say like, hey, there's other aspects about my life that have been abandoned or underexplored in my earlier years, to really step into that and say, hey, these are things that I want to do. And, you know, I want to learn to surf. I want to do painting. I want to, you know, go to plays. I want to enjoy other things that that's out there in the world. And I think Mexico has been a great offering for a lot of Afro-expats.
Absolutely. And two things I want to say is in relation to, you know, art. Like, you made a good point the other day about a lot of people do art on the side. Yeah. You know, they do it because for them it's like, how do I make money off of this? Or it's a hobby, or I'd love to be an artist, but am I going to be able to survive off of being an artist unless, you know, you get into the right circles, or you almost get lucky, but it's kind of an almost get lucky scenario, or you have someone who can kind of float you until you get lucky. But here, I think what you said is so on point, and that is that people will survive off of doing what they love. Yeah. You know, and the reason why I think that works, which is part two of my point, is you don't need as much. Yeah. You know, you can, like, if you're able to say, you know what, I'm good with this scenario, and it's not just about kind of the things that we all get pushed towards is earning a lot of money. Yeah. You know, that's like our priority. I got to earn a lot of money. Even if you earn a decent wage or living in the US, it just goes a lot further in Mexico. We've explored that over and over, but, you know, I want people to really understand and put those things in perspective. For example, one of the things or points that I make sometimes when I ask someone, what's your budget for your rent or whatever, like, let's say it's $500, right? You see a place you really like that's $700. Don't just look at that. Like, look at everything else and what everything else costs. You know, like, are you dropping that auto payment? Are you dropping that auto insurance? Are you
Mortgage.
dropping that mortgage? Are you dropping that super expensive insurance for whatever, the car, yourself, your health, whatever? And then think about, what do you have to pay for? So the point of saying all of that is that I think what transpires in people is that they are now able to see themselves doing the things that they love, and things that bring them a lot of passion, things that bring them a lot of pleasure in terms of art, whether it's music, like you said, drawing or theater or whatever, speaking out, out loud in public and doing presentations, whatever that is, learning a new instrument. It's
certainly a new language too.
Yes, learning a new language, living in a new culture. It just kind of almost, opens a whole other chapter that otherwise you may have felt like, I was only bogged down with surviving to, pay bills and get by. So I feel that this move or change definitely allows us to have a lot more awareness of the things that we enjoy doing, and being able to survive and still do them, and that's the difference, I really think.
And the things that we don't need, right? Like, that's one of the things that so many people talk about. And what I love about my journey of this very nomadic lifestyle is I can't carry a bunch of stuff with me. I have one large suitcase, a duffel bag, and a backpack, right? I can't carry a bunch of things with me. And anyone who's moved, internationally knows, you don't bring a lot of stuff with you. You don't want to. You know, it really is a task of downsizing and also asking yourself, okay, what's really important? What do I really need? And so a lot of people that I've talked to have sold their houses, or they may still have their house but rent it out. They've sold their cars. They've gotten rid of a lot of the material possessions that they've accumulated for 10, 15, 50 years and said, I don't need all this stuff, right? And to make that move and kind of live at what you need and not have all the material items that, people have accumulated to satisfy their life, but to really be in the water, to be in the mountains, to see the sun every day.
Absolutely. And my husband is a great testimony for that. And I say that in a positive way, because the journey to getting there, the journey to, realizing oh, this is just stuff, and, he'll tell you himself, when we downsized and, he got rid of things, I got rid of things, I got rid of more things, he got rid of more things. He says it all the time. He's like, I felt like an elephant was lifted off my back. It's just this load of things. Suddenly you don't even remember what those things are because they weren't really that important. It was just, I think we cling on to the more the merrier, and really and truly it's a lot. It's a lot. It's a lot. And I think that when you start realizing, oh, I have the freedom to check, whatever that is on your list, and now your mind is free to be in this new space, this new country, because I'm all over the place. And I just, I see a photo to somewhere, the first thing I do is, how far is it to get from San MigueldeAllende to blah, blah? And I'm like, oh, I could drive there? Okay, So my point simply is it's fun, it's exciting. Now that we're a little more settled, I feel like there's so much here I want to see and do. And although I love to travel, I've traveled to a lot of countries, fortunately, in my past, pre-COVID and things like that. Mexico for me is my oyster. I just am there's so much to see and so much to do. I literally feel like I don't need to go to another country right now. I just want to exhaust all the things there are to do here before I go anywhere else, and it's affordable, and it's beautiful. It's everywhere beautiful. I go, it's just amazing, waterfalls and beaches and people and these little towns. And even yesterday, that little crowd that came up to us, they wanted to take pictures. We're like, what? Us, And it was interesting. They were like, we're from Chiapas, and they all wanted photos suddenly, and I was just like, this is just so sweet.
Yeah, it's very sweet.
Super sweet. So tell me, what do you envision for, you know, this project, and, you know, because I think in 10 years we're going to see your name on a book.
Oh, yeah.
Because I don't know, you said to me when we did our interview that only one other person has something similar, and this was in the 70s.
This was the last book on Black Expats was written in 1968. Wow. Ernest Dunbar's The Black Expatriates.
That's right.
And so, like, imagine all the things in Black life and then just global life in the world that have changed and are different since 1968, right? And of course, a lot of Dunbar's focus was on Europe, which was a major destination for a lot of Black Americans moving out, particularly France and Germany, right? And so, like, I think there's a underemphasis or even focus on Mexico because people are like, oh, it's just right there, you know, it's you know, it's below Texas, Arizona, it's right there, and so it kind of gets dismissed. But I really want to appreciate the historical emphasis of Black people coming to Mexico, and really also like Black people in the history of building Mexico too, like even further, is really I think an underappreciated aspect. That Black people have been here. Black people have been coming to Mexico for quite some time, right? And Black Americans in particular have been coming here. And so I really want to do some of that historical work and then bring that to the contemporary and say Black people are still coming here and they're finding beautiful things here. They're making important contributions to their cities and to the places that they have elected as home, right? They're building families here, right? To really challenge what, again, we think about borders and boundaries and seeing people cross that. And a lot of the conversation around immigration in Mexico is people coming through Mexico to the United States, right? But not all migration is into the United States. There's people who are leaving for a variety of reasons, right? So I envision certainly a book, and you know that's the scholarly and academic thing to do. But I really think because I've heard such beautiful stories, and I think it's a profound aspect of Black history and Black global history, is that this deserves some work and some archives. This deserves some historical accompaniment, right? There's something that needs to be put in a historical frame that people can appreciate and see and visit and see. I haven't figured all of that out because I'm still very early on. I want to be very intentional and precise in what I do, but I do think like there is a need for archival work here. Like there's a need for maybe even a documentary on some of the Black people that have moved here, right? And then really moving around the world, I think would be really beautiful. So I haven't figured it all out, but I am envisioning, and I continue to be inspired by you and so many people who have made that leap, right? And who are living in Mexico and really anywhere in the world that did not envision it. I don't know if you envisioned living in Mexico at this age and this time.
I mean, I think in my personal experiences, I've spent a lot of time in and out of Mexico, and I had opportunities before to live in Mexico, but at that time it just wasn't the right time for me nor the right location. But I knew that I always wanted to be an expat. That has always been I want to live somewhere else in the world, and it wasn't so much so the reasons that I have now. You know, it was just I wanted to be somewhere different. I really wanted to be somewhere where it just felt very different from what I knew. You know, I mean, I'm not knocking the U.S., but it's not that exciting. You know, in terms of its history, I feel that.
And its contemporary life too.
You know, I just think that if I'm in Florida and I go to Seattle, it kind of looks the same in terms of the things that I see, the way things are constructed, the types of shops and stores. You know, it's very commercialized, and you get this. Not everything in every single place has its, you know, different charms. Like I really love New England. I think it's quaint, it's charming. I love the little towns and stuff. But you're still gonna see a Starbucks somewhere. You see a Starbucks everywhere. You see them here and in Europe. But in terms of like the way things are constructed and put together, I feel that a lot of the U.S. kind of follows these same patterns in general. You know, you're always going to see at the mall the same stores. You know, you're not going to see, you know, someone there making jewelry. And I just appreciate these differences when I go to other countries. And I think that for me, I always wanted to kind of feel like in each new place there it feels like a new place, completely different. Exactly. And that was what I felt way back. I mean, my first international trip was in '97 to Europe, and you know, I didn't know what to expect, and it was just very different for me. And then from there I traveled a lot, and I was able to go to a lot of different places, you know, in the last X amount of years. And once I had my son, I knew for a fact that I did not want to raise him in the U.S. for various reasons, but mostly I wanted him to experience what I experienced as an adult, as a child. And I wanted him to have another language, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. You know, so for me, Mexico wasn't necessarily the first thing on the list, but it is on the list, and I think it's absolutely a great option. I am not disappointed. Like, there's nothing about living here that I'm disappointed about, to be honest with you. I really feel blessed and grateful. You know, I'm like, you know, there's really not a lot to complain about. Which is really interesting,
because that's another pattern that has come up in my research, is that the transition to Mexico is certainly not as challenging as many other places, right? Like many people who are expats, some are moving on their own, like they're self-initiated, what I call, they move on their own, like there's no constraints, they're not on a work assignment, or they're not in the military, like they just move on their own. Other expats, you know, like certain places can be a bit challenging to adjust to, right? Like, again, there's people who do move to Mexico and find out that it's not for them, right? But I would say is that a lot of people find the transition to Mexico pretty easy, right? I think one of the largest barriers is the language, right? Like the language can be a challenge. And then of course, like Spanish sounds different in different parts of Mexico. So, and even some Mexicans have trouble understanding other Mexicans from different places. So, and learning a language is easy for some people. For myself, it's a challenge. Like I have to work at it every day. That would be one of the barriers, but for a lot of people, like the transition to Mexico was pretty seamless, right? There's things that I think no matter where you go in the world, you'll have to adjust to. But what I find is that compared to other places that some expats have lived in, many said that choosing Mexico was a pretty easy transition. And I think that is a testament to, again, one of the reasons why it is such a favored place. But other places that people choose, since I do focus on the world broadly, offer there are some challenges, right? That
I can imagine.
You know, that are pretty tough, and some people are like, I cannot wait to get out of here, right? So it's really beautiful to see and hear about the experience of people who choose Mexico and say like, hey, this was not too bad of a transition.
I agree. And two, I think one of the things that just popped in my head, and I want to ask your opinion about it, is, okay, so you know, there are people who, and this is just something that popped in my head, there are people who want to move to, you know, the motherland. 100% respect that. I think sometimes, you know, people get, you know, their test and they're curious, the DNA, and they want to, you know, they're curious. Like, I think I would be curious as well. Not necessarily to move, but I probably want to explore that history a little more and understand, you know, okay, what is this area of the world like? Because that's my heritage, etc. But I think some people go because they are in kind of dire need of finding something to connect to from an emotional standpoint. You know, maybe they've had a lot of trauma in terms of racism, or, you know, they internalize the racism and they want to go somewhere where suddenly, you know, I'm accepted and I'm going to be accepted here because I'm Black and this is where my family's from, even though I don't know anyone there, et cetera, et cetera. And I'm not knocking this. This is me wanting to see what you think and feel about it. So once that happens and occurs, sometimes people get to those places and they're still not
Yeah.
accepted necessarily the way that they were expecting to be. And I'll tell you why I'm saying that, because my heritage is Jamaican as far as back at, that I know. I haven't done a DNA test, but that's where my parents are from. And when, I became a teen and I had a few relatives that came from Jamaica and they stayed in our house, and I loved the way they sounded. I did not speak Patois. I mean, I understand it, but I didn't speak, with this dialect. And, then I started getting into the music and understanding, because my parents were super religious. So we didn't really grow up with really knowing and understanding their Jamaican heritage, their Jamaican history. So when I was exposed to it, I really wanted to know about it. So when I had the chance to make that trip, I went with the same anticipations, which were, I'm going to get to meet my relatives that I don't know in Jamaica, and I'm going to be so, connected, and we're going to have, fireside chats and, whatever. And it didn't happen. Yeah. I was still considered a foreigner. Yeah. So, in saying that, I think those experiences formed how I move in life and around the world, which is I am not accepted anywhere for where I'm from. Yeah. I am not accepted as a Black person in general in the US. And when I say not accepted, I mean that's not where I came from. Yeah. When we go way back, this is not where I'm from, right? I don't know where I'm from. I don't know where my parents are from. They don't know where they're from in general. So in saying that, I think we all have some kind of feeling of being displaced, but we've learned to live with where we are. We all have a sense of, where do I fit in? Yeah. And, I've seen people say, oh, I went to so-and-so or wherever, and I wasn't accepted, and I didn't feel it. And I thought, well, because you are displaced, and that's what happened to us as a race goes. Yeah. So my point of saying all of that is, even though we are all moving around, I think wherever it is that you fit in is where you call home, because you can't say right now, not everyone, but a lot of Black Americans and Black Canadians, because that's where I was born, can't say that, anywhere in particular is home. Yeah. Meaning really home as in, this is, I was born in this country, and this is where my people are from for generations back, and this is what we know. Yeah. And even when I went to Jamaica, I wasn't fully accepted there, and even though Jamaicans aren't fully originally from Jamaica, but my point is that was for me, my thing, oh, okay. No, I literally got that you come from Farian, and that was it. Like, you're a foreigner to me, and I'm like, this is home, but it really wasn't, So I find all of it very interesting. So I kind of personally gave up this notion of trying to find the perfect, color fix, the perfect, cultural, like, this is where, I just feel like wherever you go and wherever you lay your head, to the extent that you made it and you're accepted there, that's your home. That's your home. Yeah, that's for me.
I love, and that's one of the major aspects of my research, right? And why I started off with the homemaking, right? Is the reality is Black people really across a diaspora, what we even consider the diaspora, it's been a large rupture. We've been displaced. Absolutely. And the tracing of our history is a process that might not be as fruitful as it is for some people, right? Mm-hmm. Like, time and time again, we hear stories of people going to Ghana or going to Nigeria and thinking like it's going to be a welcome experience. And I've been to Ghana, right? And it was a welcoming experience, and it was a beautiful experience. But I have heard many of the stories, again, where people don't necessarily feel that they're entirely included, right? And that they're still rendered a foreigner, right? Mm-hmm. So that goes back to, I think, the larger thing you just said is like the very difficult work of choosing and finding a place that works best, right? I don't know if there is a perfect place, if we'll ever find a perfect place,
Right.
you know, of any of the people who are African descendants, right, throughout the world. But it is really, again, about figuring out, where do I feel like I belong, or where do I feel
Right.
like I can best choose, right? And that, again, is the really difficult, the sad, and the horrible realities of the damages of colonialism, of slavery,
Exactly.
of the ruptures throughout the diaspora, and the attempt to recreate and the falling out of that, right? But really choosing, you know, what place makes you feel, right? Like putting your feelings first and thinking about what place makes you feel home, right?
Exactly.
Or what place you feel like you can best actualize all your dreams or values or practices, right?
Exactly.
And I think that is a different journey for everyone, right? And it's a difficult one, and sometimes it's sad, right? To see the posts and hear the stories about people who have journeyed across the world, wherever it may be, throughout the continent, or even throughout South America too, and say, like, I think this place might be it, and then upon arrival, not so much, and that doesn't hold true.
Yeah, and that's why I think it's important to not just the research side, but soul searching. You know, why and what are your reasons? What are you carrying with you in an emotional state of mind? And where are you going, and where are your expectations, and where do they come from? Where do they start and end? You know, and also just kind of maybe expecting other people to make you feel like you should be accepted somehow or whatever. You know, we all have to deal with our own things. And from an emotional standpoint, you know, I think that it's important to, I always say, walk with grace, you know, literally walk with grace in any new place that you are, because, you know, I hate to say it, but, you know, this is their land. Like, this is where they're from. You know, they've got history. You know, and I think that it's pretty amazing, especially in Mexico, how accepted we are, considering how Mexicans can be looked at and looked upon in the U.S. You know, they really don't carry those chips on their shoulders as a whole. You know, I'm not saying everyone, but for the most part, I think people here are just of a whole different spirit, and I'm grateful for it. You know, I'm grateful that I can be here. Number one, I'm grateful that it's not impossible to enter, because there are countries in Europe, like,
you can't. It's 90 days. You gotta go.
Exactly, and if you're there, you're probably not going to end up getting to go back if you leave, etc. So I'm very happy that this is a very viable option, and I always tell people, like, you know, walk with grace. You know, keep an open mind. Yes, it's frustrating. Things can be frustrating, but, you know, the pros really do outweigh the cons. You know, bad things happen. I saw a post earlier about someone's phone getting taken and stuff, and, you know, it happens. And, you know, I always say, I'm sorry that happened to you, but, you know, these things can happen. I've had people steal stuff from me in other countries and places, and even in the U.S., you know. So the point simply is that I think we are not in, this is not a bad option, and I'm really, really, like, excited to see where all of your research goes. I think it's really important. You know, I'm glad that you are thinking in ways of documenting, not just your you know, your experiences, and not just your interviews, but really, like, keeping kind of statistical type information, because it would be interesting to see where will we be in 10 years, because there's so many people coming here right now.
There's so many people coming. That's one of the interesting things, is to talk to some of the people who have been here, you know, 2009, 1999, you know, 1995. I was born in 1995. We've been in Mexico since I was born, right? And then to talk to them about the newer generations and the newer wave of Black expats, right? And it's like, wow, you know, for many of them, when they got to Mexico City, Uncle Cleveland Gibson, who's in Mexico City, he was like, he was the only one, you
Yeah.
know. They were looking at him strange, like, who is this person, you know?
Oh, I
and
think
he's
I'm
yeah,
friends with him.
and
Yeah.
he's made Mexico City a home for him, right? But he was there in the late 90s. But to think now about Mexico City and how many Black expats there are there, right? To think about places like Oaxaca, to think about Merida, right? Like years ago, you know, how many Black people were there?
Exactly.
And now it's like a whole mass, like it's a whole population.
Right, and
really.
more people are coming. And I think, you know, as a testimony to, or testament to social media and online, I do think that that plays a huge part.
Yeah.
And that's why we do what we do, you know,
yeah.
because my thing is, I'm not here to knock other places. You
Yeah.
know, there are places that I'm like, I would never live there. But I also think that other people would love living there, you know, so let's feature, like, anyone wants to talk about where they are, you know, reach out, because no, seriously, I think it's important,
It is so important
to really show, one, the diversity, as you said, in terms of your options of places to live and move to. You know, everyone always asks, what's the cost of living? I mean, it can be anything.
It can be
You
anything.
know what?
It can
If
be
you
what
wanna,
you make it too.
Exactly. You want to live like a millionaire, you can do that.
You can do
Like
that.
if you got the funds for it, you can do that. You know, you want to live like, you know, frugal, you can do that and
that
still
too.
be in a nice place.
Yeah.
So it kind of all depends on you and your lifestyle and your choices and what you consider a convenience or an inconvenience, you know. So I always kind of emphasize that. I do think whatever your budget is, in general, some places, yes, it might be more limiting for you, but you also have to be able to do your, you know, your numbers well and do a good, you know, plan. Like if your budget is, you know, you have to be like on a really strict whatever, do your numbers, you know, figure it all out. But I think it's just a beautiful thing that you can find pockets of us around, and you know, you really found some people that were like have been here for a minute.
Yes, they are not on social media. You have to like
ask. Yeah, I mean, I think that's pretty cool to have like that experience, because I mean, I think my first visit to Mexico was in 2005, and I remember being in Oaxaca. Yeah, I saw 0 other Black people. Like, I don't remember ever seeing. I'm sure I would have remembered if there were one.
Yeah.
You know, it was like I was always the one. Like, hey, you know, whatever. And now it's pretty cool. So Oaxaca is kind of up and coming. I think in the really creative community.
Yeah, creative. Yeah, like artists, like love it. Like, full on. Yeah, food and art, like hot place. Yeah.
Yeah, I think that's a very good option.
You just did I think an interview with Suki.
Yeah, I interviewed Suki, and I love what she's doing.
Yeah.
I think it's a beautiful thing. She's creating a co-working space. There are several really amazing people that I've met. Ayana.
Yeah.
Jaron, did you meet Jaron?
I did meet Jaron.
Okay.
I still have to interview him, but Jaron is good people.
He's there.
Yeah.
There are a few other people that are there that I've only kind of like written to online. One of these days I'll get back to Oaxaca, but that used to be one of the cities that I spent a lot of time in. And I remember back then it wasn't sleepy, but I knew it had the artistic potential, because I remember, you know, there'd be like one mural and then you go a couple more blocks, but it just had like that real cute quaintness about it. But it's a city. It is a city. It's not Mexico City.
It's not Mexico City.
No, nothing's Mexico City.
Nothing's Mexico City.
Yeah, Mexico City will literally, if you haven't been there, it'll knock you off your feet. It's like New York City times what? 5?
5.
At least 5.
Yeah, population, and then just.
Yeah, it's spread out. It's massive. It's never sleepy. It's a city. So if that's not your thing, don't even plan to move there. If it is, if you love city, go to Mexico City.
But there's so many other big cities too. There's Monterrey, there's Puebla, there's Guadalajara.
Yeah.
I'm trying to think of
Zacatecas,
Leon. Yeah. There's other huge.
Querétaro.
Yeah, huge.
I just saw a post from, I think it was Caroline and it was Toluca, which is not far from Mexico City. And I'm like, what? I never heard of that place. So
like
there are cities.
That's been it. Like I'm like, I've never heard of that place. It looks nice. So,
yeah, I'm gonna show it to you after. But it looked amazing. I'm like, oh, how far is this from San Miguel? Oh, only 3 hours. Okay, I'm gonna check that out. So my point simply is, you know, I think the only barriers that, not the only, but one of the barriers that we can experience as expats is the language. So if you really feel like, you know what, I don't want to be in a place that's too expat intense, learn Spanish, right? You can go anywhere you want in Mexico. You know, you can go in the mountains and hide yourself and, well, maybe not. I was saying the indigenous people, then you got to learn another language.
Well, and there's hundreds of those languages, hundreds of indigenous languages. So we'll have a time doing that.
But I think you really have a lot of options. But I absolutely love the work that you're doing, and I think that it's interesting that no one's done this.
Yeah, like there's literally I have like Google alerts on calendars, and of course I've done, or on my internet or my email, I have Google alerts on like any articles on topics on Black expats or Black people living in Mexico. There's nothing, right? I think there's some historical conversations, like Langston Hughes' father lived in Mexico. There's some artists like Elizabeth Caulette that lived here, but like it's still very ambiguous, and it's like, and to be here and to be online and see, you know, people who are moving here and have been here for, you know, 2 or 3, 5 years, and then people who've been here even longer, and said, you know, there's some missing history here, and that needs to be told.
A lot. Yeah, I actually have a friend in San Miguel, and she said, you know, that you should start kind of the same idea, but more from a video aspect, you know, documenting and archiving everyone. And I'm just not that, I can't do the tedious thing. However, I do like this, you know, because I feel like at some point, you know, they're going to pull up these old like YouTube videos and be like, oh, there's Louis when he was la 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 la. So, you know, here we are. I think we are at the beginning of something big, but also we are pioneers. I say this often because those that have already made these moves and that continue to make the moves, well, there's, like you said, the people that did it a long time ago, but the numbers like this big, and now it's like growing and growing. And I think that we all have like these stories to tell. And so for me, just even speaking to people, even if I don't get to meet them in person, like I got to meet you and some others, that it's just so like inspiring. Really, even for me, I'm like, I'm already here and I feel inspired. Like it makes me really get excited because when I started looking at this as an option, I really did not think about where are other Black communities necessarily. Not that I minded it, it never crossed my mind because I had traveled, like I said, since '97 internationally, that at that time, I never saw another Black person. And if I did, it was rare. Yeah. Wherever it was that I did not see many others, unless maybe like in Europe, of course I would see people, but they were then from the continent. Yeah. You know, it wasn't like, oh, they're from the US, and I had some big striking conversation, which again, that's great too. But my point simply is I did not see a lot of Black Americans in other places, especially when I went to like South America. I spent time in Ecuador, in Chile. I don't remember. I'm sure I saw someone, but it wasn't in an abundance. Yeah. And then when I was moving here, I came across Black Travel Movement. Yeah. And I remember just being so excited to find this page. I was just like, oh my God, like look at these people, like they're doing what I've been doing since 1997. And I was super happy. I remember getting goosebumps looking at people's photos like, oh my God, this is great. You know, we're moving, we're doing stuff, blah, blah. I'm sure we've been doing it and I just never tapped into that particular page. But my point of saying that is that I really remember feeling super joy, excited and a lot of joy about this just kind of thing. It was a movement. It is a movement. And I think now moving is a movement.
Yeah.
It's becoming a movement. So, all of these experiences and what you're doing and, just being able to talk to you and speak to others, I really think that it's also a source of inspiration. And that's why I spend this time, because I'm just like, okay, what's your story? What's your journey? What led you here? And I think it's really a beautiful thing. So in wrapping it up, like, tell me what, like you anticipate in the end. I know you mentioned the other day that you want to teach, but you also seem like you want to do art.
I mean, I think that's one thing I blame Oaxaca for in a good way, is like forcing me to step more fully into my art, and not only just as a painter and someone who does mixed media, a lot of mixed media, but also like collect some pieces and invest in other artists, right? It's something that I want to do moving forward, like seriously, and really step into that space full force. And so I haven't figured it all out. I just know I'm going to keep traveling. I still want to see so much of the world. But I think I've really grown to appreciate just different communities around the world, and just seeing like how people have sustainable lives and how people make sense of their, this everyday movements and what they're doing. I think has been really inspirational for me. So I'm like an open book that is still being written, and I know I love to teach. I know I love to do art, travel, and I think that's going to open a lot of doors for me, and something that I create myself, for what I want to do.
I think so too. I mean, you're 25 years from now self will be like super appreciative that you had these experiences.
Yeah, which is so awesome, because so many people I talk to, they're like, oh, I wish I'd done this sooner, and then there's always like, travel when you're older, or you gotta work, and then finally travel when you're retired. And so I think I'm part of this newer generation that's realizing like the U.S. is a failed state, or is a failing state, and I think the old way of doing things and just like working and then like hoping that things turn out good, I think I'm part of the generation that's realizing, like things are really bad, and I kind of got to make some choices that are best for my health and best for my psyche, and also just kind of like see what's out here.
Absolutely. And just kind of take a different path
than
the previous generations. I mean, I think when we, as a Black race in the U.S., our history's been, rocky road. Even for those who may have had these feelings, because that's all they were back then. Black people weren't moving around the world, living internationally and learning other languages. And I think that as we've moved forward, with technology and just the globalization of everything, we're able to have more freedoms, but also kind of escape some of the restrictions that we've always known as our race goes, or even people in general. Like, I also want to inspire people of other races, like, hey, if you want to get the heck out of the U.S., like, call me, because really, like, it's a planning process. And I'm not saying trivializing, earning money and things like that, but I do think that we all have a talent and a skill of some sort. And I do think that nowadays that there are a lot of people that can help you get to that earning income. And you also need to understand, like, you don't need as much, and that was hard for me, because back in the day, that was my challenge of why I didn't want to move to Mexico, because my head was really focused on, well, am I going to make this much per year? And how am I going to do? I wasn't thinking about it from how much do I need to have a good life, and here you need a lot less. I mean, we do a lot, but, you can do a lot still and survive and do less and still be in a good, still quality. It's still quality. There are lots of options for things in terms of not just living, but, just care, your self-care.
We're the self-care generation. Shout out to Simone Biles. Like, self-care generation.
Exactly.
We'll leave the job.
Exactly. I've never had a problem leaving a job.
And for you, what's next for you? What's the next destination?
In Mexico, That's a good question. I really want to get back to Mexico City. Hopefully I can do it before, the new school year starts. We'll see. I am keeping an eye on how things are going and what they're shutting down and not shutting down right now. I mean, we still have to be cautious, but I really want to get to Mexico City. I want to see the anthropology museum. I want to take my kid to the kids museum. So I'm not really sure, about the enclosed spaces and things like that and what the restrictions are, but that would be probably on my list. ¿Qué más? I found this other place yesterday, the one I just mentioned, Toluca, I think it is, and it's not far. So maybe somewhere there. Everyone talks about, not everyone, a lot of folks are talking about Aguas Caliente. So we drove through that on our way back from Zacatecas a few weeks ago, and it looked nice.
Okay.
It sounds nice.
Is that a waterfall?
No, I think it's a city, a city than anything, but
I've heard of it. I might have it in my notes. I have a long list of different places. I think I wrote that down a couple weeks ago.
Yeah, we've driven through León, which is only an hour and I think a half from San Miguel.
That's a big city too.
Yeah, it's huge, and it's kind of the leather capital. So I'm kind of curious to see what does that look like. And whatever else pops up. I want to go back to Morelia. Michoacan, there are beaches there. I have a long, my list is Rolodex. So whatever I can squeeze in, I'm all about 2 and 3 day trips. This is 5, which I'm absolutely loving. Because thankfully for Cedric, he's been on it, entertaining in terms of, our entertainment has been stuffing our faces, by the way. But along the way, we're getting to see some things from our little, what are they called? Because I keep wanting to say Palumas.
I know how to spell it, I think.
Okay.
Palumas. Yeah.
Okay. They're like an open car. And, we're on the water, so we're kind of getting to see stuff on our way to eat. And then we come back, and that's pretty much our day.
And every day, or I should say every night, the sunset is beautiful.
Oh my gosh. Did you see the sunset shot that I got last night? I'll send it to you.
Send it to me, yeah.
I did actually, it's not a shot. I did a time lapse.
Okay, no, I didn't see it.
So I set it up out here and I did a time lapse. It took an hour.
Okay.
But obviously it's over in 30 seconds.
Yeah.
It's beautiful. I was playing with my features on my phone and I was like, okay, I'm going to try this tonight.
Yeah.
But the sunsets are amazing. I have to give them.
Yes.
They've got the best sunset. I think I've seen the best sunset.
Yeah, I think it's the best I've seen in a very long time. Yeah, maybe in the world.
Yeah. So anyway, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Anything else you want to add?
Oh yes. So if you are an expat, you identify as someone who moved from the United States and are currently living in Mexico. Or you plan to stay here for at least a year, or you've been here for multiple years, please do not hesitate to reach out to me and do an interview. It can be confidential, or we can use your real name. But I'd love to hear your story. I'd love to hear how you ended up in Mexico and why you stayed. And so much of the conversation I've had with Michelle would sound similar. And so when she posts this, they'll have my contact information and how to reach out to me. But I'd love to talk with you.
Yes. Thank you so much, Louis. Everything will be in the description box below. I suggest, getting in on this opportunity to share your story, inspire other people, and, at least be counted somewhere. It's going to be impactful in the future in some capacity. We can't predict it, but we know it will be. Right. So thanks again. I really appreciate everyone being here. Thanks for watching my channel. Be sure to stay tuned to the rest of my lifestyle series. I don't know how long it's going to go on, but we just keep adding new people on, and we hope that you enjoy, and we hope it inspires you. And if you have any questions at all about moving to Mexico, go to afroexpats.com. Take a look and see what my services are, and you're more than welcome to reach out by email and or book a session, ask questions that I can hopefully help you out with. All right, thank you for being here, and we'll see you again soon.